And so when it comes to kind of your life with type 1, what has been the biggest challenge you've had to overcome?
I think for me with type 1 is saying to my consultant, I need to leave this hospital to go somewhere else for an insulin pump. I think that was my biggest challenge, purely because my management wasn't great, and obviously taking the steroids, I wasn't seeing the results I needed for my diabetes. And I think it was hard when you go to clinic and they say, oh, this needs to be better, but yet you're not getting all the resources.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that's self-advocacy in action, and that's very, very powerful. So can you just talk about what happened at that point? Because obviously you've made that decision. I'm not getting the help here, I need to go somewhere else. And I think that's really powerful. So can you just talk us through what happened there and kind of where you are now? So I know you've touched on, you've got an insulin pump, so you kind of got a spoiler at the end, but
Sure.
let's talk about the journey to get there, because I think that's really powerful.
So initially, I think when I started my degree, 2017, I'd done the carb counting at a hospital near me. And then I was like to my consultant, oh, I think I need an insulin pump. You know, you go to clinic, they look at your A1Cs over the last couple of months, and obviously mine was not budging. I still on various doses of steroids. Obviously, that had an impact. We tried most of the insulins you can think of. I've been on.
Yeah. Sorry, Mellisa, just if you don't mind sharing, what was your HbA1c?
So I think I was 9.6, somewhere there. So it's 9.6. So
honestly, I've had it 9.6 and higher, so no judgment from me. So yeah, sorry, just so that we have a clear picture of what's going on. Thank you.
So I was 9.6, and obviously I was just like, we've tried everything, I'm hypoing, like this is not safe. So then I decided to take matters in my own hands. I was like I need an insulin pump. I've got another 3 more placements left, and I can't be doing this every day. So I had the discussion with my consultant, and then I said to her, I need a transfer. And then she said to me, oh, but so I said to her exactly where I wanted to go. Obviously for confidentiality, I won't say where I am at the moment, but I will say I'm in one of the London Trust hospitals. So my local consultant was like, oh, Mellisa, you can't go to this London Trust hospital. They won't accept you because you don't live in the area. And I was like, no, that's not correct. The NICE guidelines state that you can go anywhere to have diabetes care. I could go to Scotland if I wanted to. I don't need to have, don't need to live in the area. And obviously, because I have a good case, I checked everything out. Obviously, diabetes and lupus, another spoiler out there, which we'll discuss later. I had a good case. So in the event, she sort of said, okay, I was like, I'm willing for you to write this letter, but I have a strong case. So she said reluctantly she didn't want to do it. So then I went to my GP. I sort of cried in the consultation with the GP, because the GP was like, I can't understand why she can't accept you. And then a couple of days later, she rang back and say, okay, I'll write this letter, but just warning, you may not get accepted. And then obviously the guideline states if you're non-urgent, you should get an appointment within 18 weeks. I was counting down the weeks as if it was Christmas for an appointment. And then I think I got one just after I came back from Singapore with the family. I was so excited, got to the station, the appointment just got cancelled. So I was like, oh damn. But I was in the door, I'd got an appointment. So once the receptionist said, I'm really sorry, but the appointment's been cancelled, then 2 weeks later had the first appointment with my doctor. I was in there for an hour, and she was like, I can't understand why they couldn't give you a pump sooner. I should mention where I was at the time, there was a 2-year wait for an insulin pump. And she said, okay, I'm going to take your case to MDT today, and hopefully you should have an answer by the end of the week. So by the end of the week, they sort of said, oh, you're going to get an insulin pump. Then I was waiting for the letter. What happens later? the letter arrives 3 weeks later. The dear sends on annual leave due to something happening. So I didn't actually start the pump till the following January, the following year. But they were all shocked that I should have had a pump, but was refused one.
Yeah, that's there were points in there where I was like, what? And then, but yeah, I have have quite a few questions. So, firstly, I think that this is a great example of, as I mentioned at the start, self-advocacy, patient advocacy in action, knowing your rights, knowing what's available, knowing the guidelines out there, knowing how to use those guidelines and taking in the knowledge, and then which then empowers you, and then you can make better decisions, and then you can challenge the information, or you can challenge the response and go out and get what you need. And we're very fortunate, obviously, in the UK that we are able to do that. My question from that is, so how did you know about, say, NICE guidelines, or know that it was possible to transfer? Was that through your own research? Was that from the community? Yeah, how did you know that? Because obviously people can change hospitals. You're not tied to one hospital at all.
So obviously another spoiler. So I see a rheumatologist, and I've seen him for a few years now. And initially when I first saw him, he was like, "Your case is too big. I think we need specialist input." So he actually gave me 5 trusts, and like, "Mellisa, like, here's 5 trusts. Let's go home, think about it, discuss with the family, like which one you want to see." So obviously he said, like, "I can make the referral, you'll still stay with me, but I think we need some backup as you do." But also I think from my placement as well, like I've had cases on placement where clients want to see another specialist. So obviously these are the guidelines, these are the protocols that you have to follow. Obviously, say if my case was, say if I was getting really worse, obviously you'd be seen sooner. But a non-urgent case, the guidelines is you'd be seen within 18 weeks. But I think it's important for people to be aware of this, because I know a lot of people are fighting for insulin pumps, yet you can't get one. So I think you need to be aware of what is available, because I think if you don't ask, you don't get told this information.
Yeah, agree with that. And there are organisations out there. So there's Input, formerly called Input Diabetes, but they've merged with JDRF in the UK, and they help people in terms of getting access to technology on the NHS. I'll include a link to the Input website in the show notes. So please check them. Please check that out. Really great organisation there, and yeah, they'll be able to help if people do need help. Obviously, you need to be based in the UK for that. Say, why do you, or in your opinion, why do you feel that there was a pushback from your consultant saying no to your request where you clearly need an insulin pump?
I think probably, obviously, as usual with the NHS, lack of shortages, lack of staff, but time available, because obviously there's a waiting list. But obviously, yes, I had 2 autoimmune conditions, but you have to go on the list. It's like I don't know how they would always review the list, but like I wouldn't get bumped up to the top. So that's sort of like, okay, if this is not working, we need to go. I have to say my family were a bit reluctant. My mum was like, "Oh no, dear, you shouldn't really do this. This seems like a bit of a gamble." And my dad was the same. I think my sister was like, "Mel, just go for it. Like, what have you got to lose? They say no, they say no."
Yeah, and that's right. Like, what did you have to lose? Because you were in a position where the answer was no from where you were, and if you go to somewhere else and the answer is still no, you're still in the same position. And it's really, I'm really obviously really happy that it worked out for you. And as I've mentioned quite a few times, it's an excellent example of patient advocacy, self-advocacy, and why that's so important, and knowing what's available to you. How has your life been since being on an insulin pump?
I think my life's been a lot better. My A1C is now 8.2. Obviously, I'm hoping in the next year it'll go down a bit more, but I feel like it's a lot more manageable. I can actually go on a commute and not hyper like I do. I recently transitioned from Dexcom G6 to Guardian sensor. So by having this change of clinic, I was actually funded pump and sensor funding as well, which is rare. But obviously, when you go to a different team where they actually look and evaluate your lifestyle factors and how diabetes impacts that, you can actually see my team have really invested in what I do as a day-to-day basis, really.
Yeah. And so can you just talk about what is the Guardian sensor?
So the Guardian sensor is similar to the G6, but obviously like it just suspend with my pump when I'm going low. So it's like a 24-hour sensor that records my data on a graph on my insulin pump, what my glucose is like every day from every minute on my pump, and tells me
Yeah.
it'll suspend low like when I'm going low. But it's actually been quite good to have, I think, for me, especially like if I'm going out for exercise, like it will tell me like if I'm going low on my walk, whatever, it's there.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And as I mentioned at the start, we're recording whilst it's seen the middle of a pandemic, and you've got lockdown 2, which has recently started in the UK. And there's been a real shift in terms of, obviously we're not meeting face to face anymore. Well, the majority of hospital appointments have been cancelled when it comes to face appointments. And there's seen a shift to virtual appointments and telemedicine and et cetera, et cetera. How have you found your virtual appointments? And also, do you have any advice on how people can make the most of them during the pandemic?
So I think obviously virtual, I think may be here for some time. I think we have to accept that there'll be times where we see our conditions on a screen. I think for me, when I see my rheumatologist for my lupus, I always try and make sure I've done my notes like a week or 2 weeks before, so I know like what was my symptoms like before, what are they like now, and if I've had any flare-ups or anything that I need to discuss. Also, I think if you have any like arthritis or any other condition, it's always good to take photos. Like if you're in a flare-up, especially this time as we enter the winter months, because if you've got to remember, your rheumatologist only sees you on a screen, but if you have access to their email, you can always email these things, because obviously they're having to adapt the way they see you, so they're not seeing you like in a clinic room. So the more photo evidence you have, the better for them to have the actual picture. When I see my DSN, basically I just download my pump and she'll have the pump in view. But I think it's also good to have the active ownership, like, okay, this is my data, have a look at it, think about what would you want her to, in my mind I always ask myself, okay, what would my DSM want me to give her answers to or questions to, like, so you just have an active bond of, okay, this is what I'm thinking, what do you think? But also just take ownership and take the lead. Like, remember, you have diabetes, but you're trying to empower yourself with it, not the other way around.
Yeah, yeah. What I'm really picking up from what you're saying is actually taking that time to prepare for the appointments, because obviously if you're face to face, you can easily show, oh, I've got this. Whereas actually, you can still do that, but you just need to take a picture. It's working around and making sure that you're getting the most out of that time, as as uh, as getting the best out of that time as much as possible. Do you? I don't know. Do you think that because obviously for I'm slightly generalizing, but where people don't have that commute, where people aren't busy going out socializing and doing etc., etc., that actually allows more time to to prepare for you for your appointments, which is ideally what you should be doing anyway. But you could be busy with life, so you don't prepare as much. But actually, now some of those things have been taken away. Do you think that has a impact?
I think that has an impact, but also, say for example, say if you have dyslexia or you need more time to process information, that can be a barrier to virtual platforms. So just explain that to your consultant. Like, would it be okay for you to email me my basal rates? Yes, we've discussed them over the phone, but I think I do better with written communication, so I can actually see it. Because obviously, now, like, yes, you can just bring your loved one to the laptop and say, this is my partner, but you have to think about you're having to comprehend this information in a different way. So just even thinking about what's your learning style and how you want to make the most out of the appointment. I think if you do, you don't know unless you ask, but I think my clinician or my nurse has been great just to say, okay, Mellisa, I'm going to discuss this, I'm just going to write you an email of the rates I want you to change, and then we can follow up. Don't be afraid to ask, because I think sometimes we just forget to ask, and we sort of think, oh my god, what were the rates she said 10 minutes ago, I've forgotten them. But it's just, I think about this whole virtual communication is that the reliance on self-reporting is different, but you have to build that rapport by virtually.
Yeah, I if I could summarize, and correct me if I've missed anything up, but I get that you're kind of, I've written down four, I'll call them top tips, would be to prepare for your appointment, um, be aware of your learning style. So as you mentioned, that you could have this conversation with your DSN, but you might need it written down. So just say, can you send me an email with my basal rates? It's also about building that relationship with your healthcare professional virtually. And then also, don't be afraid to ask questions, and to make sure that you come away with all the information, that you need. Is
Yeah,
there anything that,
that's
yeah,
great, Dan.
yeah,
I think it's just a final one I'd add is include your loved ones, because I guess, yes, they see you with type 1 diabetes, but include them in the appointments. What's to say, oh, they can't come, the appointments are virtual? Like, you can just say to your wife or your husband or your mum or dad, like, you got 10-15 minutes to just jump in, so you like have that briefing. Like, it's, yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, really good points, and really good top tips there as well. And so we've you've mentioned it in places as well, but you also live with lupus. So can you just talk to us about what lupus is, and how you were diagnosed? Or yeah.
So, so lupus is another autoimmune where it attacks healthy tissues in the body. So it can affect someone from their skin, their organs, to their joints. Can affect them in different ways. Unfortunately, there's no cure. It can make people more quite fatigued and quite tired. They can have frequent rashes, constant flare-ups. Um, so it's like, can it be any part of the body, really? For me, I was diagnosed the same day as on my birthday, same day as diabetes. So obviously at the time, lupus wasn't very active, but as long as throughout my life, it's sort of progressed a bit. But at the moment, I'd say I'm remission, so things are quite settled, quite stable.
That's good to hear that things are quite settled and stable at the moment, and long may that continue. And when how so I know things are settled now, but has there ever been a time where it's not been settled, and you're trying to manage kind of lupus? Well, you're managing lupus and managing type 1, and how does that all interact? How do they interact, and how do you manage that, and what's that like for you as an individual?
So, so obviously with diabetes and lupus, the one thing that does affect both, that combines the two, is steroids. So obviously
Mm.
you've got the steroids from the lupus that I take every day, but also the impact it has on my blood glucose. So it's trying to balance that, but also trying to balance like my stress levels, making sure get enough sleep, making sure that you're trying to be as relaxed as possible. I know it sounds silly, but when you're managing a condition like this, you have to sort of pace yourself, because obviously you can't just say, okay, I'm going to do 20 things on a to-do list. Like, you do get tired. So it's just using about being kind to yourself, knowing, okay, my body's getting a bit tired. Let's sort of take a break and relax. And it goes back to those reasonable adjustments. People with lupus can experience brain fog, so they sort of need more time. They need more rest breaks, especially as we're now working from home. So just thinking about, okay, is my chair adjusted to the right height? Am I taking enough movement breaks around the house? When I'm on my laptop, am I taking my first hour? And that sort of thing.
Yeah. And sorry, I've lost. So if there's somebody living with who's listening, who's living with lupus and type 1 diabetes, what advice would you give them?
I would give them advice to like journal your good days and your bad days. This is with diabetes and lupus. What I tend to do like once a week is look at my graph, but see what's happened in the week, but also know that although this has happened, like I still reflect on those good and bad days. The other thing I'd say is try not to do too much. Like, we'll take one day at a time. Obviously, it's a long-term condition. Like, you should not try and learn about it in like a whole day. Like, you've got the rest of your life to live with it, but try and manage it in a healthy way. And my third tip would just be to utilize the support networks that are around. Shout out to Versa Arthritis, shout out to Diabetes UK panels, you know who you are, guys. For other organizations, your rheumatologists, your nurses, like, they're there to support you. I think you have to remember, like, you need to utilize the support. Don't feel like, oh, you can't. It's always available, even in the pandemic. I know it may be hard to just pick up a phone, but like, just email, like, it's there.
Yeah, really good advice. Really good advice there. And you mentioned, kind of touched on panels and community. How we can talk about the diabetes community, we can talk about, say, the lupus community. But how important has been has community been for you in terms of look, just having people there who understand what you're going through? Where have you seen the power of the community effective in your life?
So obviously the diabetes community has been there like non-stop, like from the moment I open my phone and look at Instagram, it's there. But also the friends I've met along the way are just there. Like, I think, like, even I think someone put about if your basal rates aren't working, like what to do to check if they're not, how to improve on them, things like that. Also, um, I've done some work with versus arthritis. We have a young adults panel, and I just did a piece a couple of weeks ago with them. I think it's about just tapping into the resources that are available. They do a lovely set of webinars and events. I'm privileged enough, well, not privileged enough, but I'm in a lovely support group with lupus, with people with lupus. We check in on each other. We have messages like left, right, and centre, but they also do events as well. It's good enough for families to tap in as well. Like, sometimes we have guest speakers, doctors, whatever. But I think it's important to just, if you've been diagnosed, like, it's important to meet other people. I think I left that too late in my life. I think I would have wanted to do that a bit sooner. So
Yeah, that's a good point, and good kind of reflective point as well. And actually, that leads on very nicely to my next question, which was going to be, knowing what you know now and where you are now, what would you tell yourself 14 years ago? Yeah, what advice would you give?
um well, 14 years ago, I'd have probably said to myself, don't be so hard on yourself. Like, I think with this long-term condition, you need to accept that you can't always be perfect at everything. You need to just take things as it comes. There's days where I'm like a total stress head. Mum will try and say, okay, you need to calm down. But I think it's just learn to listen and pace yourself. Your body's your engine. It can only do so much. Um, So I think it's just that, and also just being grateful. Like, you've come this far in life. I think you need to have that time to appreciate, like, sometimes you won't get it right first time, like it needs tweaking and modification. And so, like, say if I had a flare up, like, okay, well, you've had a flare up, but like we can always change the goalpost. So we've done this, you had a flare up here, like how can we, with help of my team, my medics, like how can we get back to that reduced dose of 5 milligrams of steroids? Like how can we get back to that, but making sure it's a safe and effective way? It doesn't mean that everything has to stop. You just need to change how you get to your end goal. Your goal is in sight, but just change how you get to it.
Yeah, it's from what I'm picking up from what you're saying, is always moving. You're always moving forward, and whether it be 1% one day and then 5% the next day, it's always moving towards your goal. And even if the path does go kind of off, or even if you do go off path, it doesn't mean that you can't reach your end destination.
Mm.
Might
Mm.
take a bit longer, but you've, like you quite rightly say, you've still got that goal in sight. And yeah, I think having goals and things that you want to achieve and not losing sight of those goals is very, very, very important to definitely to keep you going. And thank you for sharing